so the 49ers didn't look very good.
Right.
But with what Kyle Shanahan has been able to do this year, and what he's been able to do throughout many other destinations that he's been throughout his career, in Washington with Robert Griffin III and Kirk Cousins, in Atlanta with Matt Ryan, in Houston with Matt Schaub, that's one that people forget about right there. Is it safe to sit here and say that it's actually Kyle Shanahan who is the best offensive young mind in pro football right now and not Sean McVay? Because it seems to me that teams are actually starting to figure Sean McVay out a little, and they haven't been the same team since Todd Gurley has suffered this arthritic knee injury, and he just has not looked like the same dominant running back that he was before at all this season. And Jared Goff is what he is.
Well, you're making a good case for it. Yeah, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Kyle Shanahan's done a great job. Even last year when Garoppolo went down, he did the best he could to navigate through a difficult season. But, yeah, this year he's showing that, you have a guy like Garoppolo who, when they acquired him from the New England Patriots, looked pretty good. And now they've picked up where they left off, albeit he had a year where he wasn't around the better part of that year. So, yeah, I mean, the Atlanta Falcons let a good one get away, but he was an assistant coach at the time looking for a head coaching job. I don't hold that all on the Falcons, but San Francisco made out like a bandit as it stands right now with Kyle Shanahan. I want to mention an interesting point to you about John Lynch, okay? And I'm kind of wondered about it when it happened, but I'm glad for San Francisco fans it's worked out. Once upon a time, the Detroit Lions hired Matt Millen out of the TV booth. A lot of people thought Matt had a lot of football knowledge. He certainly sounded credible on the air. That didn't work out. Set the Lions franchise forever. I wondered whether or not hiring a guy Green out of the broadcast booth, because Matt Millen had the cachet for Super Bowls too, and he was a winning player. So there were some similarities in the backgrounds between John Lynch and Matt Millen. Only Matt Millen would later on to say, told Mr. Ford, I'm not qualified for the job, but Ford said he'll learn it anyways. Well, we all know how that turned out. But, do you see where the comparisons exist between the two situations?
Yes, I definitely see that. And I also saw it when people were skeptical about the Raiders hiring Mike Mayock to the same position as well, because you never know what you're going to get with these former broadcasters going straight out of the booth, going into coaching, an avenue that they haven't been in before. And, Scott, when Matt Millen's tenure in Detroit finally came to an end, it was actually a long time after that we saw another team actually take a gamble on another former player to come into an executive position like that. So I believe many of these teams had a reason to cause the pause for that right there. But you can't just take something based off of how one situation went and assume that it's going to go that way for the others. And the 49ers, they've done a great job. Just simply the ownership, getting out of the way, letting John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan handle business. But I really have to give Kyle Shanahan his props, and also John Lynch. John Lynch in particular, because, this is one of the greatest safeties in NFL history. Right. He's one of the top 10 safeties in NFL history. And we know that he knows his defensive football, but he knows how to pick player personnel anyway. I mean, this has absolutely been amazing. The running backs that they've been able to select in the draft with the Matt Breidas, the receivers that they've been drafting, we knew that he was going to have a plan for the defensive side of the football. But this is a loaded football team all the way around. It's not one side of the ball in particular that's leading the way for why the team is having the success that it's having. See, right now there is an argument about the New England Patriots that you could make that the defense has carried them all season long because Tom Brady has looked like a glorified game manager most of the season. You can't say that about the 49ers in particular. And even at times when Jimmy Garoppolo hasn't played well, we knew that that was going to be a possibility for this year. He was working his way back from a serious injury, suffering that torn ACL a year ago. And usually it takes guys 2 years to get back to their normal selves as opposed to that 1 year. Adrian Peterson, he defied all the odds because he's just a freak of nature. I've never seen anyone else in any other sport do anything like that before. So I didn't expect Jimmy Garoppolo to come in and do the same thing. Right. But when I look at them and I just see the weapons that he has around him, George Kittle, one of the best young tight ends and one of the best overall tight ends in the game of football right now anyway. They have some good, speedy young receivers. They added a good veteran receiver in there last week, trading for Emmanuel Sanders. I really like Matt Breida. I like Tevin Coleman, a guy Atlanta should have kept. You know, I'm really fascinated with what it is that they're building. And here's the funny thing about this, Scott. They're doing all of this right now, and the players who were normally supposed to start the season for them, most of them haven't been there for the stretch of this because they had many offensive line injuries and many offensive personnel injuries that they suffered during the preseason, and those guys were scheduled to be out for a month to 2 months of action anyway. I mean, the offensive line's doing a good job of protecting for the most part, and they're not even fully healthy yet.
Well, it's interesting how you bring up the Tevin Coleman, Kyle Shanahan connection. That's a good point. That really is for a lot of folks. When you talk about coaches bringing in players that they're familiar with, you don't need to scout them when you've seen them with your own two eyes and you've worked with them. So that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. And, yeah, I'll give you this, okay? You can't judge one situation and think they're all going to work out. But let me go back to Mike Mayock. You brought that up. I got to know Mike Mayock about a year and a half to 2 years ago in Jacksonville, took on Buffalo in the playoff game out in Jacksonville. And I knew Mike Mayock was a good hire for the Raiders. I knew it. You can learn so much about football from this guy. It's ridiculous. And the 10 or 15 minutes, and I didn't even interview the guy. I was just picking his brain. I knew Mike Mayock belonged in the front office, and John Gruden was smart enough to add him to his because there's more to Mike Mayock than just judging talent. He's got an old-school mentality is what he has and an eye for judging talent. That was one of Gruden's best hires, was bringing in Mike Mayock. And, you know, we'll say what you want, but I applaud Mayock with the way that he stood his ground with Antonio Brown. He did. Unbelievable. But you're right. You really are.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that. And, you know, with Mike Mayock, listen, the Raiders are eventually going to be somewhat similar to what the 49'ers are anyway.
Right.
We see how they wanted to build their team. They stocked up on draft picks. They wanted to establish a new culture. And many didn't understand it. I was one of them at first. But John Gruden's done a good job of that so far. And even though they've lost their past 2 games, we didn't really have many expectations for the Raiders coming into this season. But here's one thing that I'm seeing from the Raiders this year that I haven't seen in the previous 2 years, Scott. They're fighting. They're fighting to stay in games. And even if they're losing, they're giving this thing everything that they have. And it really makes me disappointed in many ways that the Battle of the Bay is going to be over after this year with the Raiders moving to Las Vegas next season. Because that's always a fascinating matchup with the NFL, just a fascinating rivalry there with the Battle of the Bay with the Raiders and the 49'ers. One of those traditional NFL cross-city, cross-state rivalries.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
And we're not going to see that anymore going forward.
It wasn't always that way, though, when the Raiders went down to Los Angeles, became the L.A. Raiders. So, yeah, when it returned, it became intriguing. But I really do believe that the Bay Area is a one-city football town. I really do believe that. I mean, San Francisco and Oakland are that close to each other. Yeah, it'll certainly be missed without a doubt. But you're still talking about teams that would only see each other once every 4 years and once every 8 years in their respective home stadiums, unlike other sports where you do it year in and year out. But I see your point both ways. But San Francisco, you know, think about it. The Golden State Warriors went from Oakland over to San Francisco right nearby. So the traffic situation being what it is, will it be lost? Yeah, but you know what? I'm glad that Las Vegas is getting a team, and Oakland had an opportunity to go ahead and keep that team, but failed miserably. Now, I'll go back to what you just said. The Raiders have been fighting. I give John Gruden an awful lot of credit for keeping them battling, especially with some of the adversity that they've had to deal with early on. So, yeah, it could be an interesting team. And you always have to wonder about the Raiders as they move into their new city in Las Vegas, that you want them to have that fighting spirit so that the town of Las Vegas has something, you know, good to look forward to going into next year. That's for sure.
Well, they have very high expectations on them coming in because, you know, let's not forget that the Las Vegas Knights, their first year in the city, they went to the Stanley Cup Finals. They didn't win it, but they went to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Right.
So they're going to have a lot of high expectations and pressure on them going in. just based upon what that team did. But I expect them to perform. And as disappointed as I am that the Battle of the Bay is coming to an end, I'm excited for the city of Las Vegas as well. And not to get off track here, but you brought this point up, and I do have to say this, though. And I'll speak more on it later on in the week if you'll allow me to. But I have to elaborate really quickly on the Golden State Warriors moving from Oakland to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
We're only 2 games into the NBA season. For the Warriors, tonight makes 3. They're playing at the Pelicans tonight in New Orleans without Zion Williamson. And Scott, from what I saw last Thursday when they opened up the Chase Center in their regular season debut, that already looks like it has proven to be a mistake. And I say that because in Oakland, in the Oracle, that fan base was real. That was a real basketball fan base that absolutely loved their Warriors. What I watched last Thursday, there were a lot of empty seats in the Chase Center because that's San Francisco, and San Francisco is a lot more corporate than Oakland is. So I just wonder, with the Warriors not, and maybe this will improve throughout the season, but of course they're going to have to improve throughout the season too because they look absolutely terrible to open up their season. But I'm not going to speak too much on that. What I'll say to close this portion of this out is this. I wonder if that doesn't improve, is that going to continue to affect them as an organization? Because you can tell just simply by the energy that was in that building, or the lack thereof, I should say, it doesn't feel like the same organization. It doesn't feel like the same basketball culture that was there. And I'm not even saying that because Kevin Durant and Andre Iguodala are gone and Klay Thompson's out with an injury. It just feels different. The aura of the building feels different. It's a beautiful state-of-the-art arena, no doubt about it. But I just wonder, when they made a move like that, did they also not take the basketball culture into consideration that comes with the Golden State Warriors' history and organization in Oakland and the Oracle Arena?
Well, the only thing I'll do to reference that is I remember when I covered the Detroit Pistons on a regular basis, and the Palace was a Scotch and whiskey crowd, which is where you're going with this, okay? Whereas where they ended up moving them to downtown Detroit, I'll still be curious to see how the Pistons fare at Little Caesars Arena for a while. I hated to see the Pistons leave the Palace. I really did, but obviously things worked out where they wanted to keep everybody close by. So, yeah, I think that it's certainly going to be an interesting change without a doubt. Yeah, some interesting points. Now, let's go back to the Raiders for a second. The Vegas Golden Knights, had great success their first year. I don't think the Raiders are under that much pressure like the Knights were, because for this reason, Las Vegas was an unproven sports town. It really was. So, Vegas walked in there early on as the only game in town. The hockey team, therefore, it was unknown territory. The NFL will draw. And remember this, Xavier, you got 8 games a year versus several. So they will pack that building every single game. They'll even pack preseason games, and they'll even pack playoff games when they ultimately get there. Where when you're talking a 41-game home season, preseason, playoffs, the Knights had a tougher task, the Golden Knights, than what the Raiders will have. They really will. But, yeah, would they like to go in there their first year and win? Yeah, but will that be the beginning of no means, all means? I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, the NFL, Xavier, is the NFL. NHL is the NHL. Do I think the NBA could make it in Vegas? Probably not. I couldn't. I don't think they'll be expanding there anytime soon. Do I think MLB will get there? I doubt it, unless some of the other franchises go by the wayside due to stadium situations. So I don't know. Yeah, you certainly hate to see Oakland and San Francisco go away, but also don't forget that when the LA Raiders had them, you only had one team anyways, so that only bodes well for the 49ers that they'll own the entire area. They will.
It definitely does, and it seems that the 49ers are also going in a similar direction that they were headed in anyway when that change from Oakland to L.A. happened with the Raiders, even though that team, their first year in L.A., went on to win the Super Bowl. Now, I'm not putting those type of expectations on these Raiders as they head to Las Vegas. But, Scott, I will say this. I do believe that they'll compete for a wild card spot next year if everything goes according to plan and their major players are able to stay healthy. Because I really think people have very short memories